Hey, Vineyard family, how are you guys doing? It's Ray, and I wanted to take just a few minutes of your time, if I could, during this weekly connection email to just chat about our sermon series that we've been going through over the last few weeks, and we have a few weeks ahead. We've been hitting a series that we have entitled "Bridging the Gap," sharing the good news of the gospel of Christ with a younger generation. We've been talking about how do we take this wonderful good news of God's rescue plan that we have in Jesus and share it with a younger generation, particularly those Gen Zers, those folks who are 18 to 28 or so. It is a generation, as we've been talking about, that is increasingly post-Christian, that is increasingly um, different in their viewpoints of morality and right and wrong. They're increasingly indifferent to church. They're increasingly more than likely to not set foot in a church. And so, how do we take this good news and bring it to a generation that so desperately needs it? They're a generation who has very specific needs and hurts and that are filled with anxiety and worry and fear and identity crises, and they're searching for truth in all the wrong places. The reality is, as we've been saying, the church has the good news, the answer to what ails this generation, but they're not looking to the church for the answers. And so, how do we as the church adopt a missionary mindset? How do we reach out to this next generation? That's what we're talking about. And one of the key lines that I've been using each week is, to the extent that our hearts are broken about something is the extent to which we'll do something about it. This is really what I want to hit home with this series. I don't want to just give it. I'm trying to make it as practical as I can to give us assistance on how do we reach this next generation. Um, but I don't want it to just be good information. It's my desire that there would truly be fruit from this series. It's my heart, my desire, and I know it's God's heart and desire that we would see fruit, that we would see young people come to know Jesus. And so, with that in mind, I just wanted to give you a little challenge. I don't know if I've been hitting it too hard at the end of each series or each sermon, but I really want to challenge you to be praying about these topics. Four specific prayer points, two from the first week and two from the second, that I just wanted to challenge you to be praying. If you can, take these 4 points and just pray them daily. They're this. I would love if you guys would pray that God would awaken your heart, maybe anew and afresh, to the goodness of the gospel. The gospel is called good news. The good news that God has rescued the world in Jesus Christ, that he has sent his son as a sacrifice to bring forgiveness of our sins and restoration of our relationship with the Father. It's in Jesus that we find hope and the answer to all that ails us. It's my desire that God, when I think God's desire, that he would awaken us to the just how good this good news truly is. And so I would ask, maybe pray each and every morning that God, would you reveal to me and show and just impress upon my heart how good this good news is. And the second would be that your heart would begin to break for what breaks God's heart, that God would put on you a healthy burden for this younger generation, that when you saw folks living in lifestyles that we feel that God wouldn't have them be living in, that we wouldn't just point fingers at them, that we wouldn't just push them aside or write them off, but that we would be broken for a generation that is broken, so that God would begin to move in your heart and soften your heart for this next generation. That would be prayer point 2, really coming out of our first sermon. And then 2 others is that you would pray that God would put maybe just one person that's in your sphere of influence on your heart to begin to connect with. Last week we talked about how do we begin to bridge the gap and get close to those who are younger than us. So maybe pray that God would highlight somebody, a name, a person who's in your sphere of influence, somebody in your family, a relative, somebody that you work with or go to school with, somebody that you maybe have relationship already, but that God would be highlighting anew and afresh. That's the one that I want you to start getting close to point them towards me. And number 4, but number 2 from our second sermon is that he would also maybe highlight one place that you could extend your sphere of influence. If you were with us last week, we talked about, first of all, fishing in our kind of our spheres of influence, those places closest to us, but also that we would have eyes to see other places where we have connection with folks who are not going to church, folks who are younger than us. It could be sports teams that our kids play on. It could be natural groups that we volunteer at, but can we start to extend our view in our sphere of influence? And so maybe you can pray that God would reveal to you maybe one place that you could meet people, maybe that you haven't thought of before. And so I wanted to challenge you. Pray those 4 things if you can, and allow God to open your eyes and move your heart and point you towards those who so desperately need the good news of the gospel. And so I would say, if you haven't seen the first 2 messages, go to our website, vineyardfishkill.org. Search for Vineyard Hopewell on our YouTube, or search for our YouTube page at Vineyard Hopewell, or right on our app we have our first 2 messages. And then join us this weekend as we begin to talk about how do we have spiritual conversations with those who are not going to church, who have different perspectives than us. How do we begin to have these conversations? So love if you joined us this Sunday as well. And so anyway, God bless you guys. Keep praying, and I'll talk to you soon.